fishing season, I bet you a lot of folks out there, of course, you always have ice fishing and all this other good stuff, but I think people are getting the itch to get out there on the rivers.
Yeah, and finally, we have mostly liquid fishing now, and no more that hard water fishing that we had all winter long. And this is a really pretty special time of the year because at ice out, the fish finally get to see the surface as well, and they're hungry. They haven't had as much to eat all winter, and so usually this time of year, right at ice out and before the spring runoff starts, fishing's pretty good.
You know, this talk about, mussel disease, let's talk about that. Is that still going to be a worry of you guys this upcoming fishing season?
It's not only a worry, it's a huge task that we're tackling. We do not want mussels in Montana. We don't want invasive species at all. So for all winter long, the fisheries folks have been in the process of getting together their inspection stations, the staffing for those, the procedures, the processes, and everything that we need to start making sure that any boats that come into the state from places where mussels are living, that they get cleaned and drained and dried here before they get into Montana waters.
This talk a little bit about the certified boater registration that is now available online.
Okay, we have a process where if you're local, if you're living in Montana, you get certified, you get cleaned up, you go boating in clean water, that you can go back and go boating in clean water again without having to get inspected every time you try to put your boat in the water. So there's a certification process where folks can get their boat certified, and as long as they don't take it to some place where there's mussels, or as long as they don't bring something in from out of state, that they can go fishing.
Let's talk a little bit about grizzly bears. Governor Bullock announced that he established a grizzly bear advisory council, and applications process ends coming up here on April the 12th. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, that's, as you know, grizzly bears have recovered well since they were put on the watch list here a number of decades ago. There's plenty of grizzly bears around, and Montana decided here a couple of years ago that it was time to delist them, to take them off the list, and manage them like we do every other kind of large predator. And the courts disagreed with that and said, no, you got to go back and consider a whole bunch of things. So in the attempt to start getting that process back on the rails, the governor is in the process of appointing a grizzly bear committee that will span a whole lot of folks, from biologists to landowners to conservationists to tribes, and those folks will start again putting together the process and the justification for getting the grizzly bears off of the endangered species list, if that's what they decide to do.
Let's talk about some rules, regs, changes here. It's now online, the 2019 regulations for deer and elk hunting and antelope hunting. Let's talk a little bit about that and some of the big changes that the hunters can see this upcoming fall.
Well, in this immediate area, just south of Billings here along the west face of the Pryors, there no longer will be a permit-only buck season there. That's, as you know, in the middle of our chronic wasting disease area, and so that will be a general season there, and that's the biggie as far as regulations changes right here. In general, the deer, elk herds are doing very well, and so the seasons will be fairly liberal.
So does this kind of seem a bigger change with regulations compared to the other years, or is this kind of a standard change?
This is a pretty standard change. Every other year, we go in and take a really hard look at every regulation and every hunting district and make those changes. This is the mid-year. So the adjustments this year were more of a tweak of last year's decisions than they were a whole entire rewrite. We'll be going back into that process in late fall this year and starting to take a good hard look at all of the regulations going forward, and that would kick in the 2020 season.